In the heart of a bustling Atlanta courtroom, where the air was thick with tension and the hum of whispered speculation, a single moment was about to shatter the status quo. It was a routine hearing, the kind where justice was supposed to be served with paperwork and procedure, but today, something else was brewing. A woman sat in the back row, unnoticed by most, her presence as quiet as a shadow. Her name was Eleanor Hayes, and she was about to become the fulcrum of a reckoning no one saw coming. The room was packed, benches creaking under the weight of spectators, lawyers, and officers. At the center of it all was Officer Daniel Carter, a white policeman with a badge polished to a shine and a reputation built on unquestioned authority. He stood at the witness stand, his voice steady as he recounted a night of alleged crime, his words painting a picture of a suspect young, black, and dangerous. But his eyes kept darting to the back of the room, where Eleanor sat, her pen moving in deliberate strokes across a legal pad. She didn't speak, didn't shift, didn't even blink too often, but her gaze was a weight Daniel couldn't shake. Eleanor's skin was a deep, matte brown, her gray suit absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. Her hair was pinned into a tight bun, her posture composed, almost regal. She wasn't a journalist, not a lawyer, not a grieving family member. No one knew who she was, but Daniel felt her eyes like a spotlight on his conscience. He muttered to the officer beside him, his voice low but sharp, "Who's that woman? She's staring like she's got a vendetta." The younger officer glanced back, then shrugged, but Daniel's unease grew. He adjusted his collar, his testimony faltering as he stumbled over details. The suspect's hands were empty, he said, then hesitated, correcting himself they might have held something metallic. Eleanor's pen paused, circling a phrase in red ink, her face unreadable. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs, but Eleanor remained an island of calm. Her notes weren't just observations, they were a map of Daniel's unraveling. Each time he contradicted himself, she underlined a word, her movements precise, clinical. Daniel's voice grew strained, his hands twitching as he tried to regain control. The suspect was non-compliant, he insisted, but the words sounded hollow under her silent scrutiny. The judge called for a recess, and as the room began to stir, Eleanor stood, her papers sliding into a briefcase with a soft rustle. She moved toward the counsel's table, not with fanfare, but with the inevitability of a storm cloud rolling in. When the hearing resumed, Daniel was recalled to the stand for cross-examination. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice soft but razor-sharp. "Permission to ask one question, Your Honor," she said, and the judge, caught off guard, nodded. She faced Daniel directly. "You testified the suspect's hands were visible and empty, correct?" Daniel nodded, eager to assert control. "Yes, ma'am." Eleanor's head tilted slightly. "Then why, in your initial deposition, did you claim the suspect held something metallic?" The question landed like a gavel, and the room froze. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed, his face flushing. "It was a stressful situation," he stammered. "Things get misremembered." Eleanor's voice dropped, cold and precise. "So you admit to either misremembering or fabricating a detail that implied a threat?" The words weren't loud, but they cut through the room like a blade. Daniel's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to his colleagues, but no one met his gaze. "You're twisting my words," he snapped, his voice rising. "I was there. You weren't." Eleanor's response was calm, devastating. "Which version of what you saw, Officer Carter?" The room held its breath, the silence taut with the weight of her words. Daniel leaned forward, his voice dripping with resentment. "You think you're clever, don't you? Picking apart real experience with technicalities." Eleanor stepped closer, her presence commanding despite her stillness. "I think words matter," she said, "especially when they justify force. Especially when they explain why someone didn't walk away alive." The courtroom's oxygen seemed to vanish. Daniel's hands fidgeted, his wedding band spinning on his finger. Eleanor turned to the judge. No further questions. She returned to her seat, her silence louder than any argument. But Daniel couldn't let it go. His authority had been pierced, his credibility questioned by a woman he didn't even know. As he stepped down from the stand, his rage simmered, his boots hitting the floor with purpose. He stalked toward Eleanor, who was adjusting her pen, unbothered. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he snarled, his finger jabbing toward her face. "You don't get to question me. Not you." The room watched, stunned, as his fist swung, fast and sloppy, connecting with Eleanor's left cheek. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Blood sprayed across her suit, her head snapping sideways. Time stopped. No one screamed. No one moved. Eleanor didn't fall. She stepped back, controlled, her eyes locking onto Daniel's with a clarity that made him flinch. Blood dripped from her mouth, but she didn't wipe it. She didn't speak. Her silence was a verdict, and Daniel, panting, realized too late what he'd done. The courtroom was a mausoleum, every eye on Eleanor, every breath held. The judge's gavel hung in the air, useless. The bailiff stood frozen, unsure whether to act. And Daniel, for the first time, saw no allies in the room. Eleanor reached into her pocket, retrieving a cloth. She dabbed the blood, not with panic, but with the precision of someone cleaning a tool before its next use. Then she spoke, her voice a blade drawn slowly. "Do you recall the Thompson case, 2021? Daniel's face went slack, the name and knife in his memory. She unfolded a document and placed it on the witness stand. "This is Section 14 of the SAFE Act, passed after Thompson. It prohibits force under a misrepresented threat. You may have forgotten, but the system hasn't." Daniel didn't touch the paper. His shoulders sagged, the color draining from his face. The judge's gavel finally struck, but it was too late to restore order. Murmurs rose, and then the back doors swung open. 6 agents in plain clothes entered, their steps unhurried but absolute. The lead agent held up an envelope. "Daniel Carter, you are under federal investigation for assault and abuse of power." Daniel's outrage flared. "You can't arrest me here. This is a court of law." Eleanor stood, her voice steel. "That's the problem, Mr. Carter. You think this room makes you untouchable. It doesn't." Handcuffs clicked around his wrists, not with spectacle, but with finality. As he was led away, he thrashed, shouting, "This is political. You're making me an example." Eleanor's response was cold, final. "No. You made yourself an example. We're just making sure it counts." The courtroom exhaled, but the story was far from over. Agents remained, setting up a laptop that projected a flood of files onto the courtroom monitor: complaints, affidavits, photos of bruised wrists and swollen eyes, all tied to Daniel Carter. A 17-year-old black male with a concussion. A 14-year-old hospitalized with a skull fracture. Cases dismissed, footage lost, complaints buried. The room burned with the heat of unveiled truths. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice low but unyielding. "No protocol justifies blood on the sidewalk from children who never held a weapon." The lead agent spoke. "We'd like to introduce the individual who initiated this investigation, Deputy Director of Federal Enforcement Systems Oversight, Eleanor Hayes." The name detonated in silence. Daniel, half-shadowed in the doorway, muttered, "No, that's not," but his voice broke. Eleanor approached the bench, her words measured. "I came to assess judicial integrity. I didn't expect to be struck by an officer who swore to uphold the same Constitution I serve." The room recalibrated, standing in silent acknowledgement of her presence. Daniel's fall was swift and total. His badge was unpinned, his certifications revoked, his name blacklisted. He was escorted to a holding cell, where the silence was worse than solitude. The walls seemed to judge him, the red blink of cameras a constant reminder of his exposure. He screamed, "I was decorated," but the echoes mocked him. His wife, Laura, filed for divorce, enclosing a photo of their son, Michael, at a justice rally, the banner behind him reading, "Justice is not optional." A child's drawing showed an officer kneeling before Lady Justice, the badge laid down willingly. Daniel's knees buckled, the paper trembling in his hands. Eleanor, meanwhile, became a force beyond the courtroom. Her testimony before Congress was surgical, her words reshaping policy. "When Officer Carter struck me, he reacted to being held accountable. He hit me because I reminded him power has limits." The SAFE Act was reintroduced, its clauses no longer symbolic but procedural. Departments nationwide faced audits, internal affairs divisions were redirected, and Daniel's name became a cautionary tale, erased from records but etched in memory. Years later, Eleanor's legacy was everywhere. Cadets studied the SAFE Act with red underlines. Classrooms displayed her image, blood on her collar, eyes unyielding. A mural in Detroit showed a woman placing a book on stone, her back turned. Law students left copies of the SAFE Act at justice monuments, a quiet tradition spreading across states. Eleanor refused medals, declined interviews, and founded a Center for Ethical Enforcement, its motto carved in steel: "The badge is not the power, the restraint is." Daniel died in custody, a stroke claiming him in silence. Eleanor attended his funeral, placing a note on his coffin. "No one is born to be forgotten, but you chose to be." She didn't forgive or curse, she reminded. Back at her center, an instructor quoted her. The badge you wear in your heart cannot be taken, but it can be erased by every wrong you leave unchecked. The Department of Justice bore a new inscription. Justice does not need protection, it needs enforcement. Eleanor's silence had become the law, her presence a standard no one could ignore. She didn't return to that courtroom, but her echo did, in every verdict, every tightened pen, every officer who hesitated before acting. Justice wasn't emblazoned, it was lived. What do you think about this story? Have you witnessed or experienced moments of injustice or violence that reshaped your view of the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below whether you agree with Eleanor's approach or have a different perspective. We want to hear your voice. Let's discuss how we confront these issues in our lives and communities.